Similarly, if a person is in an office building and he comes across women who are not related to him, then what should he do? Lower the gaze. Similarly, if a person is at school, if a person is at college, if a person is at the mall, if a person is anywhere and he doesn't have a choice but to be there, then what should he do? Lower the gaze. And the same also applies to women. And we also see that whenever there is haram on the outside, whenever there is indecency on the outside, the first thing is that you should stop it. If it's beyond your ability to stop it, then what should you do? You should save yourself. You should protect yourself. Because at the end of the day, you'll be questioned first about who? Yourself. And then you'll be questioned about what you did to stop other people from wrong. So, a person cannot say, I live in this society, I live in this day and age, I work in this building, I work at that office, I go to that school, therefore I cannot control myself. I have to look at what is unlawful. No, you can definitely control yourself. Your eyes are in your control. Nobody can force you to open your eyes. You can lower them. So we see that in this ayah, we have been given precautionary measures. And amongst them is, first of all, that you control yourself. You lower the gaze. The Prophet ﷺ said, if a Muslim happens to glance at the charms of a woman, if a man, Muslim man, he happens to look at the beauty of a woman, obviously that woman is non-mahram to him, and then he turns his eyes away. He does ghaddul basar. He lowers his gaze, he turns his eyes away. Then Allah will bless his worship and devotion and will make it all the more sweet. Allah will bless him with the sweetness of ibadah, that he will begin to enjoy worship. This is the reward of lowering the gaze. That if a person is looking at something that is unlawful, and he remembers, I'm not allowed to do this, he lowers his gaze, he turns his eyes away, and he does not look back. He does not look back at it again. Because he knows that is unlawful, then what's going to happen? Allah will bless him with the sweetness, with the pleasure of ibadah. That he will be able to have khushu'. He will be able to enjoy acts of worship. And if a person does not control himself, then will he be able to have khushu' in salah? Will he be able to enjoy worship at all? Not at all. It will not be possible. So what's the summary? That a gaze that can put a person in fitna, what should he do? He should control it. He should turn it away out of the fear of Allah and in hopes that Allah will grant him great reward. Now remember that this does not mean that a man is required to look down on the floor and then walk. This is not what is meant. What is meant is that as soon as there's something that he's not supposed to look at, as soon as there is a feeling of attraction, what should he do? Immediately look away. And this is with regards to oneself. That if you happen to look at something that is not lawful for you to look at, you lower your gaze. What if you find someone looking at something they're not supposed to be looking at? Then what do? Nahi anil munkar. You're supposed to forbid them from wrong. You should stop them from wrong. So for example, if you're walking with your brother, and there happens to pass by a sister, and he's looking at her, he's admiring her, what should you do? Let him? Because he's supposed to get married one day, and he's supposed to be looking for a potential spouse, and you should tell him more about that girl? No. What should you do? Tell him to lower his gaze. We learned that Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, he narrated that at the occasion of the farewell pilgrimage, Hajjatul Wada', Fadl ibn Abbas, who was a young cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, he was riding with him on the camel during the return journey from Mash'ar al-Haram. And they happened to pass by a few women. And these women, they came to ask the Prophet ﷺ about something. So one of the women, she was talking to the Prophet ﷺ, asking about something. And Fadl, he started looking at that woman. And that woman noticed that, and she was looking at him as well. Now imagine, she's supposed to be asking questions from the Prophet ﷺ. He is looking at her, and she is looking at him. So the Prophet ﷺ, he turned the face of Fadl to the other side. Meaning he put his hand and he turned his face away to the other side. So this is what should be done. If you feel that somebody is looking at something that they're not supposed to be looking at, and you have that authority, you have that, relationship with them where you can actually say something, where you can actually do something, then you are responsible. Then you are supposed to tell them to lower their gaze as well. And this hadith is very well known. It's reported in Bukhari, Abu Dawud, Tirmizi. And we learn in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that I saw a young man and a young woman looking at one another. A young man and a young woman, they were looking at one another. And I became worried for both of them, of shaitan. That shaitan is going to influence them and he's going to make them do something wrong. So he became worried for them because they were both looking at one another. So what do we see? That a person should control himself and he should also be concerned about others. He should lower his gaze himself and he should also tell others to lower their gaze. So for example, you could be with your husband, you could be with your brother. A man could be with a friend. And in that case, what is our responsibility? Amr bil ma'roof wa nahi anil munkar. Because many times it happens that a person does not realize. He does not realize. In that moment, he's so dazed by the beauty of that person. He's so impressed that he's looking at one thing after the other, admiring one thing after the other. In his mind, he's thinking about Allahu A'lam what. So what is your obligation? Stop them at that moment. And we see the way of the Prophet ﷺ that he should not say, go away from here, look down, don't look at her. Immediately what did he do? He just took his face and turned it away. That's it. And remember that if a person does not control his eyes, if a person does not lower his gaze, and he continues to look at what is unlawful, he continues to admire what is unlawful for him, then this is actually the zina of the eyes. This is the fornication of the eyes. The Prophet ﷺ said, the zina of the eyes is looking. The zina of the eyes is looking. Looking how? With lust, with desire. And the zina of the tongue is speaking. What does it mean by that? That two people who are not related to one another, they are talking to one another in a very seductive way, in a very loving fashion, expressing their love, expressing their desires to one another. This is what? Zina of the tongue. And the zina of the ears is listening. That a person listens to someone who is saying wrong things. And the zina of the hands is striking. For example, stroking with his hands. He's not doing anything wrong. There isn't that sexual act. However, they're holding hands, for example, unrelated, holding hands, shaking hands. Or for example, one has his arm around the other person. This is what? The zina of the hands. And the zina of the feet is walking. That every time a person walks to that person or that thing, to look at haram, to enjoy haram, then what is it? The zina of the feet. The soul wishes and desires, and the private parts, they either confirm or deny that. That if a person has this desire in his heart, then what's going to happen? Eventually it's going to come out in the eyes. It's going to come out on the tongue. It's going to come out on the feet. And eventually it's also going to lead to the private parts. And the Prophet ﷺ, he warned us. He said that I mostly fear for you two things. I fear for you two things. And what are those two things? Following desires and long hope. I fear for you, my ummah, two things. That you will follow desires, that you will go on fulfilling your desires. And you will have long hopes in life. Because when a person follows his desires, then what happens? There is no limit. He does not care about what is lawful, what is unlawful. And when a person has long hopes, then he is refrained from what is important, what is necessary, what is urgent. So the first command given in this ayah is of ghaddul basar, and the second command that is given in this ayah is of hifzul furuj, protecting the private parts. And in protecting the private parts, what comes first? Covering them. And remember that in this ayah in particular, the command is to who? To the men. So the men should cover their private parts. What does it mean? That the part of their body that must be covered. They should not expose it. Now the question is, what part of a man's body must be covered? In other words, what is the satr of a man? The satr. Seen tara, what is the satr of a man? The satr of a man in front of a man or a woman. The satr of a man in front of a man or a woman is what? From the navel to the knee. From the navel all the way down until the knees, and the knees are included. So for example, if a man is wearing shorts which are above the knees, are they okay? Or that barely come to the knees, are they okay? They're not okay. They must be below the knees. The Prophet ﷺ said, a man should not look at the private parts of another man. So we see that the awrah, the satr of a man must not be covered only from women, but it should also be covered from who? From other men. The Prophet ﷺ, he said to Ali radiallahu anhu, that do not look at the thigh of the living or the dead. Do not look at the thigh of the living or the dead, because the thigh is what? Awrah. So whether that person is alive or dead, even if you're washing the dead body, you're not allowed to look at the thigh. You're not allowed to look at the thigh. We also see in another hadith that is reported in Daruqutni, that عورة الرجل ما بين سرته إلى ركبته. That the satr of a man, the awrah of a man, what must be covered, is what is between his navel to his knees. So the part of the body between the navel and the knees must be covered. In a hadith we learned that Jarhad al-Aslami, he stated that once he was sitting in the company of the Prophet ﷺ, and this man, Jarhad, his thigh was exposed. You can imagine people are sitting, and his garment was such that it exposed part of his thigh. So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, do you not know that the thigh is awrah? Do you not know that it is awrah? It must be concealed. So what do we see? That يَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ, the men should cover their private parts. Part of that is covering the awrah, not exposing the awrah, which is from the navel to the knee. The Prophet ﷺ also said, beware, never remain naked. Meaning, do not remain naked. For with you are those, meaning the angels, who never leave you alone, except when you ease yourself or you go to your wives. So feel shy of them and give them due respect. So a person should not expose his awrah unnecessarily. That just because he's alone at home, he says, okay, let me walk around naked. No, this is not permissible. Why? Because there are angels. There are angels who are watching the person, and a person should be shy before them. He should give them their due respect. So, the clothes that a man wears, what type of clothes should they be? They should meet particular requirements in order to cover the satr properly. In order to cover this awrah properly, a person, a man, he should wear clothes that meet certain requirements. And what are the requirements? That first of all, there should be such clothes that cover the satr. So for example, if a man is wearing pants, if a man is wearing any lower garment, how should it be? It should be such that it covers the area from the navel and underneath. Because sometimes it happens that people wear their pants very low, and their shirts are also small. So as they bend, or as they jump, part of their stomach will show. And the part of the stomach that shows is also that which is below the navel. This is not permissible. What a person should wear must be such that it covers the area that is under the navel all the way up to the knee. So this is one condition. Similarly, in some countries people wear such clothes that are loose, like for example a sheet they will wear around their legs. So in that case as well, it should not be hung too low that the part of the body that is below the navel is exposed. It should be on the navel, and better if above, so that the area that must be covered is not exposed. Secondly, the clothing that a man wears must not be see-through. It must not be see-through such that his private parts can be seen through them, or his thighs can be seen through them. No, they should be thick enough that they cover the body. They should be thick enough that they cover the body. And thirdly, the clothes that a man wears, they must not be so tight. They must not be so tight that the private parts of a person are exposed through them. For example, sometimes in sports, in certain sports, men wear certain clothes which are extremely tight, especially on the lower body. And they're so tight that sometimes literally their awrah is being exposed from the front as well as the back. This is not permissible. A person should not wear such clothes that expose the thighs, that expose the private part, that it is just as though the body has been painted and there's no garment that is covering the body, that is hiding the figure. So the clothes should not be so tight that the figure is being exposed, the private parts are exposed through them. And if a person thinks that it's okay to expose parts of the body, such as the awrah, at certain times, for example, when playing sports, or for example, when swimming, this is not permissible. Because no matter what a person is doing, it is not permissible for him to expose his private parts. Whether it's done in the name of healthy lifestyle, such as that a person regularly is swimming, or a person is playing tennis or whatever, because these things you can do even while your awrah is covered. You can do them. It's not that difficult. So a person must not make things such as this as an excuse. Rather, he should be concerned about obeying the commands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given as they are. And the only case in which it is permissible to expose the private parts, to expose the awrah, the part of the body that must be covered, is in the case where a person is getting some treatment. So for example, if he has to get some surgery done, if he has to get some treatment over there, if a person is handicapped, if a person is completely dependent on others, and he needs a caregiver who has to look at those parts of the body, only in that case it is permissible. Other than that, it is not permissible for a person to expose his private parts. Because we have learned in the Quran that وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ. And we also learn in Surah Al-Ahzab, ayah number 35, that وَالْحَافِظِينَ فُرُوجَهُمْ وَالْحَافِظَاتِ, the men who guard their private parts and the women who also do so. So guarding the private parts is a requirement of Iman. It is a requirement of Iman. It is an obligation upon us. The Prophet ﷺ said, a man should not lie with another man without wearing lower garment under one cover. A man should not lie down with another man without wearing a lower garment under the same cover. This is not permissible. So what does this hadith tell us? That it's not just that a person should not expose his private parts. It's not just that a person should not do haram with them, but also that he should not let others touch them. He should not let others touch his private parts. Do you understand? Because sometimes people become very frank, and in that they will touch one another's private parts, they will touch the thighs in a fashion that is incorrect, sometimes a lot of excitement, sometimes out of anger. This is not permissible. Touching the private part of another, looking at the private part of another, this is not permissible. Because it goes against protecting the private part. And if you notice at the end of the ayah, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? That Allah is khabirun bima yasna'un, that Allah is fully aware of whatever they do. Because sometimes people will follow these commands. They will not expose their private parts. They'll appear to be very chaste. They will lower their gaze. However, they will do it out of fear of people, not fear of Allah. What do we see in this ayah? That fear of Allah is being instilled in people. That don't just refrain from these things out of fear of people, just because people are watching you, but rather you should refrain from these things because Allah is watching you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ghafir, ayah 19, that يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. He knows that which deceives the eyes and what the breasts conceal. So the deception of the eyes, that a person quickly, in a very secret fashion, he casts a glance at someone, and then a second glance, and then a third glance. This is the treachery, this is the deceit of the eyes. It's possible your mother doesn't catch you. It's possible your wife doesn't catch you. But remember that Allah has caught you. Allah is watching you. In Surah Al-Mulk, Ayah 14, we learn, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does He who created not know? While He is al-Latif, subtle, the one who notices the fine details of something. And He is Khabir, He is acquainted. So, a person should protect himself, he should guard himself out of the fear of Allah. Because we see that many times, people who are married even, men who are married even, they cannot get rid of this bad habit. That behind closed doors, while hiding from their wives, they will watch pornography. They will do things that are haram. A person should remember that, okay, if my wife does not catch me, if my parents do not catch me, so what? Allah can see me. And out of the fear of Allah, a person should stop. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever can guarantee the chastity of what is between his two jawbones, whoever can guarantee the chastity of what is between his two jawbones, what is between the two jawbones? The tongue. And what is between his two legs, meaning his private parts, I guarantee paradise for him. A person who controls his tongue, and a person who controls his private parts, who saves his tongue from haram, who saves his private parts from haram, then the Prophet ﷺ said, I guarantee paradise for him. This is a very serious matter. A very serious matter. That if a person protects himself, then there is salvation for him. And if a person does not protect himself in this regard, then there is great punishment for him. If a person does not lower his gaze, if a person does not protect his private parts, then there is severe punishment. We learn from a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned one of the occasions when the angels, they took him to see Jannah, to see Nar, to see the punishments and to see the reward. He said that the two angels told me to proceed on. So we proceeded on and we passed by a hole like an oven. It was a ditch, a hole like an oven, like a baking oven. And a baking oven, what does it have inside it? Firewood, heat, smoke coming out of it. With a narrow top. It had a very narrow top and a wide bottom. And the fire was kindling underneath that hole. Whenever the fire flame went up, the people were lifted up to such an extent that they were about to get out of it. So imagine with the flames of the fire, the people were lifted up. And whenever the fire got quieter, the people went down into it. And there were naked men and women in it. The people who were being punished in this oven were who? Naked men and naked women. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the angels, what is this? Who is this? Who are these people? They told me to proceed on. And then later on they explained to him the meaning of what he saw, and they told him that those whom you saw in the hole were az-zunat. Az-zunat. Who are az-zunat? The men and women who commit zina. The men and women who do haram with their private parts. So if a person protects his private parts, what does the hadith tell us? I guarantee Jannah for him. And if a person does not protect his private parts, there is severe punishment in the hereafter. So we see that this is not something small. It's something very, very important. This is why, again I mentioned that it is as obligatory upon us as salah is obligatory. If a person neglects his salah, are there consequences? Definitely. If a person neglects lowering the gaze, neglects protecting his private parts, are there consequences? Definitely there are. Both are important. Very, very important. Because when it comes to deen, we think deen is all about praying the salah in the masjid, giving the adhan, or for example, reciting the Quran, going attending classes. This is what deen is about. But deen is about personal life even. Deen is about what you do with your eyes, where you look, how you look, what you do. Deen is also about all of these matters. Because our religion is of Islam. Total submission, complete submission. That a person even submits his eyes. That a person even does with his eyes what Allah has commanded him. And he stays away from what Allah has forbidden him. So these are the kind of teachings that are given to us by our religion. Why? In order to protect us from wrong. In order to protect us from harmful consequences in this dunya as well as the hereafter. Let's listen to the recitation.
قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون.
Now in this ayah, the men have been addressed in particular. And in the following ayah, the women are being addressed. So you see that this command is given separately to the men and then separately to the women. The command could have been given together as well. But the men have been given the command separately and the women have been given the command separately. What does it show? The importance of this command. How important it is that the men are being told individually and the women are being told individually.
قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون.